Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. I'm Tennessee Fats, and today I'm shooting a video that's going to slightly bend what we cover on this channel a little bit. Just a little, okay? And you've already seen the thumbnail, so Fairly Warm Be He says I, okay? You already got your warning if you've clicked and gotten here, okay? Let's just stop there. As you guys know, what we normally talk about here on this channel is Robert E. Howard. We go on little meandering paths every once in a while where I show you some of the comic binding stuff that I've done, or maybe some Kickstarters that I've supported and stuff like that. And that's always fun stuff, but that's sort of really filler. Really the core here is sticking to that Robert E. Howard content. And we've done that. But I think there's one aspect of really the Hyborian age that if you're only sticking to Robert E. Howard, you're kind of missing it. And the reason for that is because this character actually wasn't created by Robert E. Howard. It was created by Marvel Comics. And bear in mind what I just said, okay? I just said Red Sonja was created by Marvel Comics. There are going to be differing points of view on that, because some people are going to say, no, it really is Robert E. Howard's Sonja original. So it's not. It's not. It's a totally different time and space. It's maybe the similar characteristics of the female character, but no, I'm going to say this really is a Marvel creation. So I think if we're ignoring that, we're really ignoring a lot of the story that's developed around Conan, particularly in his time with Marvel. And then there was the Conan and Red Sonja story that Jim Zub did afterwards, much later, which I believe was a Dynamite book. Or was it a Dark Horse book? I can't even remember off the top of my head. But really, you've got a lot of character development there of this non-Robert E. Howard character with the Robert E. Howard character. So what I wanted to do today is I wanted to shoot a video that's sort of introducing us, as in the viewers of my channel, to this Red Sonja character. And I figured the best way to do it was to actually go back to how most of North America got introduced to this character in 1985, which was through these. This is the comic adaptation of the 1985 movie that came out in the same year. Now that movie is where 99% of North Americans that know the name Red Sonja in the 1980s got introduced to that character. Now, the 1% that represent those guys who are driving around in vans with teardrop windows in the back and airbrushed fantasy scenes on the backside already knew who Red Sonja was, and they actually got more out of this. And then there's the demographic out there that watched the movie and actually went and saw this on the news rack later and picked this up and went, oh, I'm learning more about the characters. Here I am reading a comic about that really cool movie I watched that had Bridget Nielsen and Arnold Schwarzenegger in it. Well, they were having an affair too during that movie, which well, nobody knew that at the time. So really, I don't imagine that was a selling point. So we'll forget that for now, okay? But we're going to talk about these. Now, because this is one of my videos, what we're going to do at the end of this is after we go through these page by page, and you guys get a sense of who is this Red Sonja character, because I do believe the movie and the comics, in their purest sense, gave you a sense of who she was. I'm going to then come back and start asking some questions. And the questions are going to be some stuff that's going to make many of us go, what? Because the implications of this is going to be, well, for me, mind-blowing. For you guys, I hope at least interesting. Anyways, let's stop looking at me and let's get into the books. And we're back. Now, as you guys know, this is the part of the video where invariably I do my YouTubing. So this is where I'm going to say, if you like Robert E. Howard content, because that is what we talk about here, by all means, subscribe to the channel and make sure you hit, I think there should be a little logo over here that just click that at any point in time, it'll automatically subscribe you. If you like this video, feel free to give it a thumbs up. And by all means, when you're watching it, if you have a comment, tippity it down below, because I do respond to all of your comments. So by all means, let's get that going. And I tell you, this is a really funny one because between me shooting the intro and right now, I just had the weirdest, most awkward look from a dude when I was telling him he's fishing with the wrong lure. I think he thought I was coming onto him, which is unfortunate because I wasn't. Anyways, what we're talking about today, Red Sonja issue 1 of the series. Okay, so we're going to go through both of them, as I warned you guys earlier. So let's start with issue 1. Now, let's start with some context before we really get into this. So 1985, you got to think about what's happening here in the broader sword and sorcery context. Let me just center this here to make it a nice centered picture while we have our chat. So Conan the Barbarian is already come and gone. Conan the Destroyer is already come and gone. And Dino De Laurentiis says, hey, let's make another Conan movie. But there was a licensing issue. Now, you can all go on the Google and look it up yourselves. But effectively what happened was, I think the thought process was, let's try to do a spin-off of another Conan-like character. We're making a lot of money off of Conan over there. Let's see if we can do something else that we can make another series of movies over here that'll do well. And they went back to it and they said, well, let's do something that's a female story. And really, if you think about it, you got Bellet, who's dead. You got Valeria, still out there doing her thing. And then you've got Red Sonja. So you've really got 3 that you can go from there. And they chose the Red Sonja route, which I don't know. Listen, they did. And history wrote itself after that. So you've got this series that's out there, and you've got this character that's going to be put into a movie. Well, when they're in the midst of doing the movie, they discovered something unfortunate. And that unfortunate thing was that they discovered they didn't have the rights to use the name Conan anymore. Ooh, whoops. So you've got a movie that's basically being written. The majority of the story, I think, was done at that point in time or was close to being done. And they already had Schwarzenegger on board to do it. So what do? Well, if you're Dino De Laurentiis and the rest of the team, what you do is you say, well, let's just change the name of the character. Sure, why not? So effectively what you end up with is a Conan story with Red Sonja, but that doesn't have Conan in it, which is just kind of weird. So you end up with this character named Calidor, who is the Conan character, and that's why you see this here. And as we're going through the story, many of you are going to wonder, Tennessee fans, why are you calling that guy Calidor? It's clearly Conan. No. It's Calidor. Okay. Different. Not Conan, but Conan. But not Conan, but Conan. I don't know. It's complex. Anyways, let's get into the book, shall we? All right. So timeline-wise, for those of you who are wondering, did the comic come out before the movie or the movie come out before the comic? Well, I did do some checking into this one. I went on the Googles, and what I found out from the internet machine was that the movie came out in July of 1985. But I couldn't find anything about the specific release date of when these hit the shelves. But they do have cover dates on them of November and December. So from that, I can only assume that, and I know you're going to say you don't assume things, Tennessee fans, but I am, that the movie came out before the comics. Because there's lead time in making comics. But I do believe they were made contemporaneously, and I'll explain why as we go through this, okay? So our story opens up here with an ad for NASA. No, that's not really what the story opens up for. So you ignore that part. The story opens up with Red Sonja and her mother and her father at their farmhouse, and Red Sonja is making fun of her brother and saying, you can't handle a sword, I can do it better than you. And they make an allusion to Red Sonja's sister, Varna, who is at the Temple of the Talisman as a priestess, a warrior priestess. And they're saying, we already have one fighting woman in the family. I don't need another one. Get back in here and help me out with the chores. And the brother, of course, is saying, well, I'm better with a bow and arrow, but I will figure out this sword thing. And that's really the impetus. So you have a sense of a joking family. Sonja's happy here. Her parents are happy. She's got a brother, brothers. Everybody's happy. Happy. Okay? This is where our story starts off with. Then, unfortunately, this is where we get the intro of really the negative characters that come into the story. And the negative characters come storming in, and they say, Queen Gedrin is raising an army to go and attack this kingdom over here. And since you've got a kid with a sword here, they're all ready to go. Oh, let's go. The father says, listen, I have no issue with that kingdom. It's never done anything bad to me, and it's miles away, so over my dead body. At this point in time, Queen Gedrin, here with the whole mask on her face, says, oh, I'll take you up on that offer, and decides to kill everybody. So she orders them all to be killed. So, fuck, there goes a father and brother. Crossbow bolts, I'm assuming, are what killed them, because I don't see anybody here with a bow and arrow. And you'll see crossbows used throughout this. And then mother is dead. And Sonja picks up a sword. Now, I believe this is probably the sword that her brother dropped on the ground. And goes running over to Queen Gedrin and says, leave them all alone, and slashes at her face and cuts off part of that ribbon that was covering her face and gives her a horrible scar. Because you can tell instantly that this is going to scar horribly. Because it's like a lion bite or a kimono dragon bite. It's one of these things that just never heals. You can tell that just from this picture. Anyways, Gedrin's a little miffed. And Gedrin says to her soldiers, okay, listen, guys, here's the deal. She is yours, plaything, play with her as much as you want. Effectively saying, hey, guys, you know what? Go ahead and just gang rape the living crap out of her for as long as you want. Ugh. Okay, yeah. Okay, that's one of the, Okay, we'll come back to this particular topic later, okay? Later. Just set it aside for now. It happened, okay? We'll reflect on this later. Anyways, so because Queen Gedrin has decided that Sonja is to be killed and the house to be burnt, the soldiers, being guys who love their job, as you can clearly see here, they tie her to the door, and instead of throwing the torch all the way on the house to burn the house, they say, well, no, the flames will eventually lick up and get there, even though I did a crappy throw. And there's no sense in staying around to make sure she dies, so let's just ride off. Just ride off. It's like the first episode of every Batman crossover or every Batman two-parter of the 1966 series where they invariably leave Batman and Robin and leave. Anyways, brother now comes back. Now, this is an interesting question. Now, we're focusing a lot on the first couple pages here because there's a lot of context here, okay? Sonja has just been gang raped, okay? A lot. At least that's what I'm supposed to infer as time has passed. Brother here admits that he's not dead, but he's paralyzed. So what you're telling me is, while sister was being gang raped, brother was hearing all of this and seeing all of this. This dude is a poster child for PTSD. Now, this dude, right, Red Sonja, also a poster child for PTSD. This is all going very negatively very quickly. Anyways, Sonja says, okay, listen, you're really good with your crossbow. That's great, and I realize you're paralyzed. Get me down from here. So he shoots the bindings, and then he just drops dead. Sonja here is somewhat upset by this, logically, and the house is burning down as she's sobbing and praying for vengeance. Now, this is where things get really interesting, at least in the Mighty Marvel way. As she's praying for vengeance and suffering, a goddess appears and says, oh, you don't need to, or at least more correctly, I see you've suffered a lot, and I'm going to answer your prayer for vengeance. I'm going to give you a sword arm that cannot be beat by anybody, but, and here's like the Rumpelstiltskin sort of esque type twist at the end of this, you cannot be with any man who hasn't beat you in a fair fight. Ooh. Sonja, who has just been gang raped viciously, I don't think has any intention of being with any man at any point in time in the near future, says, done, lady, you and I are on. Great, well, I'm going to poke you on the head with my sword, and you now have the greatest sword arm in the kingdom. Take a look at the sword, pay attention. That's an important one. Anyways, Sonja says, yes, I'm going to get my strength, and I can feel it coming into me, and I'm going to get vengeance, and then we leave her alone. We then come back and we see Queen Gedren, who's now wearing a face mask at the Temple of the Talisman. And as you can see, the talisman, at least from the dialogue here, is the very item that has been used to create the earth by the gods. But humanity, in our infinite wisdom, have let it absorb too much light, and as a result it's become too dangerous, so now we need to destroy it. So the High Priestess is saying, hey, where is the Lord of Hyrcania? Because you couldn't say Hyboria or Aquilonia. You had to come up with something different. Hyrcania. Stop right there. No. Full disclaimer right here. Hycuria is in fact a Hyborian kingdom, and it is in fact exactly where Red Sonja is from, the way Marvel created her. So clearly old man brain was kicking in when I was recording and going through that one, because I completely forgot that Hycuria was right beside the Sea of Vayet. But I'm good enough to admit when I was wrong. Everybody, Hycuria, definitely a Hyborian, definitely not a fault of the writers in this one. Okay, I think we've covered that one. All right, back to the narrative. Because the lords of Hyrcania are the ones who are actually responsible for the management of this, and because no man can touch the talisman, they've just given it to the priestesses to basically take care of as almost like a proxy management, and they'll come back and just check on it periodically. Now, the priestesses know they need to destroy it. They're a little miffed because the lord of Hyrcania, or Hyrcania, has not come riding in to at least see this thing be destroyed. I don't know, if I was managing this thing for a couple hundred years, I'd probably be a little miffed that, Big Boss Man didn't come down to see this monumentous thing. Anyways, they start their whole ceremony to get this done, which basically involves everybody standing around in a circle and pointing their swords at it. Clearly that works all the time. And as you can see, these two sides here, these two sides are going to collapse in on the actual talisman, thus forever shrouding it in darkness, forevermore. Anyways, the Gedren soldiers, as you can see, are climbing up over the side of the temple, and just as the High Priestess pulls the rod out of the mechanism that causes the two sides to come together to cover the talisman forever, she finds a sword thrown into her back. Bear in mind, swords thrown into your back are important. We're going to see that a little bit later. Not a lot later, but later, okay? Anyways, they discover that they're under attack and they need to defend it. So Varna, Red Sonja's sister, takes charge and says, everybody, we got to, defend ourselves. And this is where we get the 1980s style cartoonish type of comic book that is typical for epic comics, but for some reason made its way into this comic with giant bubbly slash and where was the rumble and where was the chalked. Chalked, by the way, in case you're curious, is the sound that comes when you're bonked on the head with the scepter that you just pulled out of one of those crazy mechanisms that's made to design, basically to shroud a talisman in darkness forever. All of the priestesses die. I think it's a foregone conclusion. If you really want to make this a tragic story at the beginning, all the priestesses die, except for Varna. Varna manages to escape, and we'll see her here. Hold on, let's get the page flipped over here. Flippy page, come on. You see her escaping here because everybody's dead. And Queen Gedren says, let's test this whole can any woman touch it sort of thing. and orders one of her guardsmen to touch it. And he just, yarg, and he's dead. That's the end of him. And then she says to her maid-in-waiting, no, you pick it up for me. And she's like, you just saw what happened to dude. And she's like, lift it. Now, you gotta ask yourself, if you're this poor woman, and you just saw yarg happen, I don't care if she's yelling at you to lift it. Are you really going to lift it? Anyway, she does anyways and picks it up, and Gedren says, oh, hey, great, fantastic. So it can't be touched by men, but women can touch it. Thumbs up for evil. I like where we're going with this. Anyways, cut back to soldiers who are now chasing Varna. Here's a rope thing that she has to swing across a chasm on. And again, what you find, which is I think it's a standard problem with Queen Gedren's men, is that they're very poorly managed, probably due to a lack of proper incentives. That's what I'm going to go with, because really don't seem to be too interested in doing their job. So she's going to swing across the rope, and the guys are too busy talking amongst themselves about how they should shoot her to actually shoot her. It's really quite a thing. Anyways, she jumps on the rope, because again, we're still talking about shooting her, jumps on the rope and swings across, and here is Kalidor makes his appearance and says, hey, it's one of them, it's Varna, one of the temple guards, but why? And she's swinging across the rope, and oh no, swoosh, there's the crossbow. Remember I said we see crossbows in this? Shoots her in the arm, and oh, Lord Kalidor, yarg, again, arg, and fwished. I wish I knew if crossbows made a fwished noise. I've never fired a crossbow, but if they did, that would be awesome. I would be impressed. Anyways, she drops, and of course the soldiers say, we're going to swing across, but you know, we've already got soldiers over there as well, so it'll be fine. So they go across, and here's where you get more of that epic 1980s Marvel style that you would expect from an Alf or an Ewoks, where Kalidor has a wonderful conversation with himself about how the string is like a bow and arrow, and if you pull it taut and then let go of it, what will happen? And thrum, and everybody falls off. And he hears one of the guards behind him say, that was very clever, but now we're here and you're going to die. And he basically just dispatches them quite easily. But what he fails to do with the whole dispatching them thing is actually protect Varna. Varna has taken an arrow to the arm. She's fine. She's going to make it. She's got an arrow, well, possibly, well, gangrene, maybe. Okay, an infection. Now, theoretically, she may have had a concern there, but the odds are she was probably going to make it. Well, Kalidor is so busy with the slashy thing that he doesn't notice that somebody at point-blank range literally shoots her in the chest with another crossbow, and then he turns and slices that person. Now, this is an interesting aspect here, where Varna now says, well, yes, Lord Kalidor, the talisman's been stolen by Queen Gedren, and you need to find my sister Sonja. Now, I don't know how much time happened between that whole gang raping, burning down house, murdering whole family, and now. I really don't have a sense of it. But she seems to know where Sonja is. I don't know how that communication, never mind. I'm just going to assume time has passed, okay? Then we switch to Sonja, who is now training, and she's training with the Grand Master, and a whole bunch of dialogue comes up. And effectively, the dialogue that comes out of this is that she doesn't like men. And the old man says, oh, you can't hate all men because, you know, your hatred of men is going to potentially be your no, the hatred of men is such a beautiful young woman will potentially be your downfall. And she flirts back with him and says, oh, I don't hate all men. And he says, oh, I would have loved to have heard that 30 years, or that would have been music to my ears 30 years ago. Never mind it now, let's go pick you a sword. And she goes wandering through, and there's the sword that was in the vision at the beginning. And she says, I'm choosing this one because of the vision I had. And the Grand Master says, yes, it's been waiting for hundreds of years for the right person to pick it up. And then Kalidor appears and says, oh, by the way, your sister's dying. You need to come with me. And everybody drops everything, believes Kalidor in an instant, and they ride off for several days to where Kalidor has left Varna in a skull cave. Yes, you're reading that correctly. A skull cave. He's got somebody that's in dire medical need, and instead of getting her assistance, has ridden her off into a desert and dumped her in a cave shaped like a skull. Now, we're going to come back to that point. Sonja sees Varna. Varna explains to Sonja what has happened, and that in 13 days the world will end based on the strength of the talisman, and she needs to go and stop this, and so obviously then she dies. That's the sound, by the way, that you get when somebody dies of a crossbow wound several days later. Just like that. Anyways, she's like very upset, and Kalidor says she's dead, but there's work for the living to do. And Sonja here really comes off just being a grade A, not so nice, slaps his hand away and says, it's none of your damn business. I need to make a funeral pyre. And that's basically it. Builds the funeral pyre, okay, right? And I think what's happening here is Sonja is getting a sense that Kalidor is trying to make the moves on both her sister and her, because she's really dismissing him and slapping him away. Now, I don't know what sort of dude is trying to make the moves on any young lady, taking her to a skull cave. a skull cave. I'm not making that up. That's literally where he took her. Anyways, during the funeral pyre, I guess what happens off camera, is that Sonja sees something. Says, "What's that place over there?" And he's like, "Oh, that's Havelock. It's a great city." And she's like, "I'm going there right now because obviously it's under attack from the talisman." Again, off camera. We don't know why she knows that. Anyways, Caldor says, "No, I'll come with you." And she's like, "It's none of your damn concern. I'll do it myself." And he's like, "But it's a dangerous world out there." And she says, "Yeah, and I'll discover that on my own. Basically, up yours." And off she goes. And Caldor is smirking. "Oh, Arnold Schwarzenegger, you and your sexy smirk. You just, oh, look at you. You know what's going to happen." He's so clever. Anyways, Sonja finds her way to Havelock. And this is where we get the introduction of the other two major characters in this story, which is the Prince of Havelock, who is a child, and Falcon, who is the manservant for the prince. This is the prince. This is Falcon. Havelock has been destroyed. And what is happening here is Falcon is trying to delicately balance this giant stone arm, which has the prince on it, over top of boiling water. And a giant spider is climbing towards the prince. Now, why the giant spider wouldn't have turned around and immediately attacked Falcon as the closer prey, I don't know. Anyways, really the whole noise here has to do with the fact that you're setting the stage with the Prince of Havelock basically is an ass. He's a grade A ass. Doesn't listen to anything. And poor Falcon is doing everything to help out. Falcon, by the way, was beautifully done in the movie. Beautifully. There are some movies where you watch later and you're like, oh God, that's so painful. Like G.I. Joe. But no, this isn't that. This is like, oh, that guy just made the movie for me. Forget all the rest of the stuff. Genius. Somebody should have given that guy an Oscar. Anyways, Sonja throws a sword, kills the spider, and, Falcon is, the bumbling Falcon. Yes, very good. Everybody's fine. They get back there, and he explains, Queen Gedrin did this, and, she's on her way that way to her capital city, and how do I get there? Oh, you want to go through this toll gate, and Sonja says, something smart-ass to the effect of Falcon, you should probably just deal with this kid like a spoiled brat that he is, and just rides off, and that kind of ends that whole dialogue. And there's sexy little Falcon. Oh, yeah, there with this sexy smirk again. He's watching her. He's following her. A little creepy. A little. Anyways, Sonja, I shouldn't say he. I'm so used to talking about Conan and Kull that I'm used to telling the stories about a male character, but I'm supposed to be focusing on a female. So let's go back to this, okay? She gets to the toll gate, and she runs into the guy who actually is basically guarding the gate. This is his gate. This is his key. These are his men with weird fish helmets. I don't know where they're going with that. Anyways, and he basically, because all men are pigs and slimy, says, no, you're not going to pay me in money. You're going to pay me in your womanly wiles. And Sonja's like, yeah, that's not going to happen. I'm probably just going to kill you. And he basically gets antagonized to the point where he jumps into a fight after he gets his guys to agree to let her go if he gets killed in this fight. And she just dispatches him instantaneously. Like, snap, he's done. Gets the key, and lo and behold, fish dudes, of course, are not going to follow the actual thing that they agreed to earlier. And here comes Caldor. He comes riding in and helps out. And, oh, no, Sonja, just follow me, and we're great. And she's like, oh, but what about you? I'm leaving you behind. He's like, have you not noticed that I've literally killed half the guys since I got here? Is there something you're missing here? Now, if there is anything in this book that says that Caldor is Conan, the comment of, have you not noticed I've literally killed half of these guys since we got here, I think probably does it. Interesting aside here, though, this is interesting. Sonja does look back and sort of rides off with a smirk on her face and a smile as she's riding away from this particular incident. And in the movie, Brigitte Nielsen did a beautiful job of doing exactly this. And this brings me to another point, where I made the comment earlier where I said, I think clearly whoever was writing this had the script. The dialogue in here is so perfect and precise to the movie that they clearly had to have it. The only thing that was missing, and it goes back here actually, which is probably the funniest line I have ever heard in a Sword and Sorcery movie ever, and that includes the entire Beastmaster movie, is, at this point in time when Sonja's riding off, in the movie, Falcon turns to her and says, you wouldn't happen to have a tablecloth, would you? That is comedy gold right there. And the fact that Falcon pulled it off in the movie and it's not in the comic, I gotta tell you, a little upsetting for me, just a little. Anywho, Sonja rides off with a smile on her face. Just picture Brigitte Nielsen doing this, and you'll have a very good sense of what it actually looked like in the movie. And, of course, she gets past the gate, and this is a weird part, which doesn't really make sense. It also happens in the movie. She runs into the Prince of Havelock, who's now being tortured by ruffians for his money. Somehow, he and Falcon have ended up in front of her, even though they were behind her when... I don't understand how that works, but it did. Sonja rides in and basically cuts off one of their heads and basically kicks the crap out of everybody else so that they leave, but doesn't kill anybody else. And the prince says, well, you should have murdered them all. And she says, no, you're going to find that there's a lot of blood and war, and this is not what you do. And this is sort of a moral thing that happens between Sonja and the prince throughout this whole story, is she's trying to really de-romanticize war for the prince and make him understand that war is really just all about blood and following orders. Interesting take for Sonja, who really hasn't been at war. Never mind that. Anyways, cut back to Queen Gedren, who possibly is the more important character throughout this entire story. And the more important character turns around and is back at her own castle now with this wonderful talisman and says, I want you to take the talisman to the Chamber of Light, which is full of candles. I want it as powerful as possible. And how is his name? Hold on. Icor. Icor was his name. Icor, who is her right-hand man, who backwards, by the way, is Loki, says, are you sure that's wise? She's like, yes, I want this thing as powerful as possible. And then her bumbling sorcerer comes wandering in and says, hey, people are coming, you need to pay attention to this. And he says, let me kick on my View-O-Matic 5000 over here. And he kicks it on because he's a bumbling sorcerer, and that's how you do things. You kick them. Again, 1980s epic style Marvel Comics. I'm expecting Alf to jump out of any panel. And as he does this, lo and behold, the Prince of Haplok appears with Falcon and then Red Sonja. And Queen Gedren recognizes her and says, oh, the girl, impossible. Because clearly, and she says, she survived, escaped the fire. How fortunate. Now, this is weird. Of course, you remember what I said earlier about guards who really like their job. Clearly, she's used to her own people failing a lot. Because she was just like, that's fortunate. Anyways, she says, okay, here's the thing. Send out a party of 15 to ambush them, but kill the other two and bring Sonja to me. And that takes us to the end of issue 1. Now, this was a bit of a long one. It took us a bit to walk through this because really we were setting the story and we were setting up who Sonja was and what Sonja was. And really, this is an important thing because if we're trying to do a video here to introduce the character, well, I think we just did that. Now, again, it's a movie adaptation of the character, but, you know, it takes us to where we want to be. Anyways, let's get that out of the way. Get into issue number 2. Funny thing about this, issue number 2 for me is in much better condition than my issue number 1. If you're trying to ever find these stupid things, because you just can't find them anywhere because nobody ever holds on to them, you're going to end up paying through the nose for them. Literally, when I found that issue 1 over there, the guy who was selling it to me charged me through the nose for it because, and I quote, well, where else are you going to go find it? And I'm like, damn it. Damn you and your perfect logic. Ooh, I was angry. Anyways, the story on the cover has Sonja, this is Queen Gedren, without face mask or scar, fighting over what looks like some sort of a chasm here. And there's the talisman over there. Ooh, this is going to go places, people. This is going to wrap up rather quickly, too. Anywho, so what happens in this? They have found themselves at the border with Queen Gedren's kingdom, and they're going to go over, and she senses that it's a trap. And of course, Prince of Haplok says, no, I want to announce my presence. And Sonja says, shut the hell up. Let me go and see if it's a trap and see if it's safe to handle. And of course, the prince runs out and does a stupid thing and starts yelling, which triggers the trap. Now, Sonja says, anyway, Falcon, Prince of Haplok are drawn into this, and this is where we really see Falcon turning out to be the jockster of this entire movie. And those of you who don't know Jockster, you should watch a little bit more of Hercules and Xena. That'll really help you know who Jockster is. He's really indestructible, which is cool. And that's what Falcon is, because he's literally flipping around here and just beating the tar out of people. Good job, Falcon. Anyways, bottom line is, the ambush of 15 people fails and they all die. Although, Falcon gets stabbed with this thing that looks like an arrow that doesn't really make sense. And once again, Sonja goes back to this. This is what war is, you spoiled brat. It's blood and following orders. Look on it well. Valuable lesson there. Gedren is saying, how the hell? There's 15 people. There's 15. Fist shaking. Anywho, Sonja then moves on and they're camping because they're heading towards Queen Gedren, and he finds the prince is practicing, and she makes a smart-ass comment. She says, I thought princes do everything perfect. Why would you be practicing this thing? And he says, I was disarmed. And this is where you see the prince start to become less of an annoying ass. You really do. Because at this point in time, he says, well, can you teach me to be less fencing-like and more fighting-like? And of course, she's like, yeah, you got to hold this a little bit loose like this. And this is where things really go against her, because this prince, yeah, he's got it. He knows what he's doing. He's like, oh, you mean like this? And I got to tell you, it was one of those creepy moments. It really, really was. But Bridget Nielsen, i.e. Red Sonja, recognizes, oh, I see the prince learns quickly, and says, we'll teach you more later, and that ends that. And of course, here's Gedren watching this whole thing going on, saying, really? This is what I have to deal with. These are the people that killed 15 of my men. You guys suck. And she goes, but it's okay because there's this cave that they're coming up to. Give me a little storm and let's drive them in there. Well, The talisman ends up making the largest storm that anybody's ever seen, and it does a very good job of driving them in. And when they get there, our prince sees all these crazy statues that are in the bottom. And this is where Falcon makes a very smart and wise comment where he says, I don't like the art style of these things. You know what I prefer is statues of naked bathing beauties. And I think he's right with this. I honestly do. Between the two, be it monsters or naked bathing beauties, I would argue that the latter is probably the better one to go with when decorating your home and or a cave. Yeah, I'm just going to throw that out there. Anyways, Prince of Havelock says, I need the jewels that are in that thing because they're going to help me rebuild my kingdom. And just as they go in there, the water level suddenly starts rising, and the creature that they were walking towards that was a statue starts talking. And it says, oh, thank you for coming and bringing the light. For centuries I've slept, and I was waiting for somebody to bring me a light so I would wake up. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to eat this little morsel here, this annoying little Prince of Havelock. And this could be the end of the Prince of Havelock. But Kellador comes running in and jumps on it and says, ha! And then Kellador, and ooh, and there's fighting. And Sonja says, no, just bring it to the surface and we'll stab it together. And they do. Wonderful, wonderful. Teamwork, love it. And then she says, well, we killed it, let's get out of here. And of course, Gedren is a little upset and miffed by this. So she smashes her fancy magical television and says, this is how I will treat all things that fail me and I destroy all things in the future. Because clearly, why would you continue gathering information on your enemy that you know are coming? Especially when they're killing a lot of your men. Anyways, you have a decompression time now in the story where Sonja is talking to Kellador, Conan, and saying, you know, oh, I didn't know that you were the Lord of Hykeria and that was your job, and why didn't you tell me this? And he's like, well, you didn't seem to want a man's help, so I was just following you and helping you out. And she's like, oh, but I thought you were, you know, here helping out for another reason. He's like, oh, I did. And this is where, oh, that sexy smirk comes into play. You see, oh, he's making his move. And what does Sonja do? Well, she remembers her vow. No, I'm under a vow. I can't do this until somebody's beat me. He's like, well, prepare to be conquered. And off they go and they have a big fight. And they fight all night long and it's exhausting. And then they fall into one another and fall asleep because that's totally logical. Again, 1980s epic comics from Marvel Comics. I would expect Alf and or the Ewoks to come running out any moment now. And turn the page, they don't. Anywho, you end up here with them getting to Gedren's castle because Gedren's unaware because she smashed her viewing screen and they decide, well, we better climb up there. But Sonja, using her intelligent mind, says, you know, this prince guy's going to get me killed because he almost got me killed back at that stupid bridge coming in here. And he's going to do something stupid here. So she uses reverse psychology and basically has him volunteer to guard the door while the rest of them climb the castle to get in. So have fun storming the castle, boys. I'm going to guard the door. They climb up there and Sonja is the first one up and starts immediately killing people. And they're doing fairly good at getting by and doing their sneak attack until Kellador falls down an air shaft and yells. Not Kellador, sorry. Falcon falls down an air shaft and yells. And falls directly into the dining area where all the soldiers are. And this is where we get into more of that wonderful 1980s epic sort of stuff that's coming out of Marvel Comics where it's like, oh, get ready because we're going to do this. And he jumps down and he flips them up in the air. And again, you have Falcon being the jockster of this whole Hyborian Age story, running around while he's stuck in a candelabra, not a candelabra, but a chandelier, basically taking everybody out while Kellador is swinging around. Kind of a funny moment. I'll give it that. And of course, we cut back to the prince because, you know, what's happening with him? The door opens and hold on, I gotta get this backwards again. Icol is now leaving. There it is. Icol is leaving and he's got the gold because he knows Gedren's going to destroy the place. And in this, the prince starts fighting him. And in the process of the fight, unfortunately, the door ends up closing on Icol and the prince sees this and goes, wow, Sonja was right. War is all about blood. Ugh. But now he's stuck inside and he goes to find the people. He finds Gedren's actual chamber here, the queen's chamber, and there's the maid saying, oh, help me. And he comes running in because he's a prince. He's like, oh, I'll come and help you. And Gedren jumps up from behind this side panel and grabs him. And Sonja just makes it in that point in time because she's about to kill the Prince of Havelock. Sonja comes in to kill her. And magically, at this exact moment, a giant chasm pops into the floor. Crash. And the maid says, help me. But look how far away Gedren is from the maid. But Gedren somehow has super speed, runs over and smacks her across the face and says, silence wench. I don't understand that. I don't. You know, she could have just let her fall in and that just been it. But somehow, she smacked her and we never see her again after that point in time. I'm going to assume, again, you're going to say you shouldn't assume anything, Tennessee fans, but I'm going to assume she made it and she left. Yeah, let's go with that. Anyways, the prince has now gotten away because she was busy smacking her maid. And this is a very interesting piece of dialogue because here you have Queen Gedren suddenly pipe up and say, hey, you know, we could have ruled the world together. I offered you this and you threw it back in my face. This is all your fault and why aren't you working with me? And Sonja turns around and says, you killed my family. And it's kind of odd because this part here doesn't really match any of the story we've seen thus far. But we're going to come back to that when we get back to the end of the video. So earmark that, okay? Anyways, the whole fight is continuing as the rest of the group catches up with them, and they find themselves slammed into and trapped into the Chamber of Light where the talisman is. As they're rumble and crash because the talisman's going insane. They've left at the last minute. A chasm is opened in the ground, and it's falling in. Gedren sees this and says, no, I need to save it. At this point in time, the Prince of Haplok finds his way into the actual room and is about to actually go and get Gedren himself. And for some reason, this is weird. I'm not entirely getting this, okay? Because you can clearly see here. Let's just go over here. You can clearly see here that Gedren has caught the talisman, but she is going to fall in this chasm. But the Prince of Haplok is going after her to get her. Well, she's already gone. She's going to fall in this chasm and die. So that's kind of weird. Sonja says, no, get back and obey orders. Obey orders. And he remembers this and gets out of the way. And she throws her sword through Gedren's back as she's falling off the cliff. Huh. That whole throwing swords in people's back thing has really come back on her. Because you remember, she killed the High Priestess that way. Yeah, anyway. Then Sonja says to Calidor, says, oh, look on it because, I've destroyed the talisman. It's your responsibility to see it. Now you're seeing it. Again, this is not the sexy smirking Calidor. No, this is a concerned Calidor. Anyways, they make their way out as the castle collapses, and as it collapses, they ride off. The little nippy prince, who's really annoying, just nozzling nipping at people's heels, turns around and says, well, you need to come and join me at my castle because, once I rebuild my kingdom, I'm going to need a queen. And she goes, oh, you'll find one, my prince. And this is where Calidor turns around and says, oh, well, you better be careful when you're choosing your queen because, I've made it a vow that I will only ever let a woman have me after she's beaten me in a fair fight. And of course, here we go. Goodbye, friend Calidor. That's a challenge I might think about someday. And everybody rides off, and that's the end of the story. So that is effectively how you end off the whole story where we get this Red Sonja intro that I think it gives you the theme. Now, there are a lot of Red Sonja stories out there about the origin, but I think this is kind of a fun one, and that's why I wanted to go with this one, because really it gives you the idea that Red Sonja is basically a sword woman who will not be with any man unless they beat her with a fair fight. That's effectively the story of Red Sonja. Everything thereafter is kind of just filler. And it's kind of things that we've sort of invented along the way. So I really wanted to showcase this because I thought this was a good one to actually show you as a two-part story of just a self-contained thing of, here's what Red Sonja is. She's really, really good with a sword, and she's not going to let anybody be with her until they can really beat her as in a single combat there. So there you go. Let's get back to some thoughts on this one now. All right, now let's wrap this bad boy up, shall we? Okay, so we've gone through the comic, and we've gone through basically page by page what happened within it. Now let's start with this in a two-parter, okay? We're going to do this wrap-up twice. Once where we're going to cover the generalities, and then we're going to get into the whole Tennessee Fats conspiracy theory lunacy that will be coming later on. So let's talk about the comic itself and Red Sonja. Well, what we saw in this was really three key components that are kind of core to Red Sonja. First one is she'd gone through some trauma in her past. That is standard for any Marvel character, really, any Marvel superhero at least. And the second one is that she's a phenomenal swordstress. Well, we've got that as well, because she's got this ridiculously strong sword arm given to her by the power of this goddess that will only be lost when she decides to let herself be loved by a man that I guess can beat her in fair fight. And then the last thing that you've got in here is that very issue of the fair fight, of that she will not be with a man until they can beat her in a fair fight. That is really encapsulating down what Red Sonja is. Now, there are other aspects of Red Sonja that have kind of become the pop culture norm and almost cringeworthy now, which has to do with, the totally metal bikini that she's constantly seen fighting in and running around in and doing her thing in. And that's really part of the whole hypersexualization of the character that's happened much later. But going back to the rub, let's get to those 3 points. Trauma, sword woman, and this crazy vow thing. That's really her. Now, did the comic do a good job of actually talking about her and showcasing her? Well, I think it did. I really do think it did. It's funny because the comic is really farcical at points. You guys heard my comment when I was going through the page by page and I was saying, this is like 1980s, like epic type quality writing. I'm expecting Ewoks or Alf or the Muppets to jump out at any given point in time because it is farcical. Like when Kalidor decides to pull the rope to make a twang sound to drop the guys off. You're like, really? Seriously? This is what I'm getting out of a Conan. Well, it's not Conan, man. I gotta stop, catch myself on that one because it's not Conan. But this is what I'm getting out of a Hyborian Age book. So there are those little factors to it, but it does a good job of making the character relatable and readable to really the comic reading public of 1985. Did it do a good job of portraying the movie? Well, there are a few points where it really derivated from the movie, and they're minor. They really are minor in scope, except for one. And we're going to save that one till we get to the conspiracy theory part of this wrap up. And you guys, if you want to stick around for that, that'll be in the second part of this, okay? And there'll be this pause in there for you guys who don't want to stick around to just move on, and we'll see you in the next video. What are some of the smaller ones? Well, some of the smaller ones are, for example, the creature in the cave in the comic was living and it spoke and it was woken up by the light that they brought in with their torch. And, you know, Kalidor and Sonja killed it together and they did their thing. And that didn't happen in the movie. In the movie, the creature was a robot and it was unkillable. And the only way they can get away from it was to stab out its eyes so it couldn't see. And it made that high-pitched screech noise. And how a robot would act, listen, it's complex. We're just not going to go down there, which is probably why they went with the idea of making it a creature in the comics. Another thing that was kind of weird was when you run into the Prince of Haplok and Falcon and that balancing hand thing where the prince is on one hand and Falcon's on the other balancing it, there was no spider in there in the movie. Could have been the effect was just too expensive to put in the movie and they wanted to, and that might have been a scripted thing. Or it could have been that the comic wanted to add it in just to really add some sort of sense of urgency to draw Sonja forward into that particular situation. Another small change. I think the last real change that was somewhat major was, you remember the battle that happened when Falcon, the Prince of Haplok, and Red Sonja are heading into Queen Gedren's kingdom. And they go across that bridge that's made out of bones, and there's a trap there, and 15 people get killed. You see Falcon really presenting himself as the jockster of the movie, and just basically unkillable and fumbling his way through surviving and defeating his enemies. It's interesting that that's in the comic, but again, not in the movies. Now, I think a piece of this has to do with the fact that when they're producing a comic, they want to make sure they're putting in a lot of that sort of constant action, the constant need to draw forward, to keep the reader engaged and keep them going. I get it. I really do get a sense of that's why that was done. And that's fine. Did it detract from this as an adaptation of the movie? Well, I don't think so. I think it really stayed true to form, except for one thing, which you really have to watch for, and it slightly changes the theme and the feeling that comes when you're reading the comic when you take that into account. But again, save that for conspiracy part later. So, in summary, is it a good adaptation of the movie? I think so. I think it's okay. Is it a great comic? It's a nice two-story read. It's a nice intro to the character for people who wouldn't otherwise know it. And even though it might get some things slightly off from what Marvel originally created way back in that Conan the Barbarian comic when she was first introduced, I'd still argue it's valid. I would still argue that this is an adequate and an accurate representation of Red Sonja. So if you're thinking about picking these up because you're saying to yourself, well, I don't want to really get into the 50 different covers and buying all these things and this hypersexualization that's coming later on. I just want to see what's this Red Sonja all about, and I can't afford the first appearances. What do I buy here, Tennessee fans? I think this one's actually a fun one to have in your collection. It's going to be a hard one to find. I'm not going to lie, not a lot of people are going to have this thing, and if they are, they're going to be in crappy condition. So be prepared for it, and also be prepared to pay through the nose, because, well, trust me, the dealers know they got you on these. All right, now that we've wrapped up the comic part, let's come back to the conspiracy part in a minute. For those of you who don't want to see the Tennessee Fats conspiracy part, we'll see you in the next video. Thanks for checking us out. Okay, it's conspiracy theory time. Now, this is going to be an interesting one, and I'm going to cut this one pretty short here because I know the more questions I ask, the more this is possibly going to trigger people, and this is going to get somewhat heated. But I just want to ask these questions. Y'all can put this together yourself, and I'm not bringing out the conspiracy hat because I'm not going to go through the area of giving you my theories. I'm just going to ask the questions so y'all can ask these yourselves, okay? So, remember the part in the comic when Gedren did that crazy part at the end where she said, Sonja, you know, we could have done this together, you fool, you turned your back on me, and then Sonja's response was, you killed my family! Well, Sonja was right, she did kill her family. But does anybody remember that part where Gedren went a little loopy with that dialogue? How many of you? You did, okay, good job. So one of you did. Thumbs up, guys. We're not looking for perfection here, we're just looking for progress. Anyways, so you remember that part. What the hell was she on about? Well, this is the funny part. If you read the comics, there is no explanation for what the hell she was on about. Honestly, at no point in time did she ever try to offer the whole mess to Sonja. It just didn't happen. That was a piece of the original script from the movie that somehow made it into comic in a way that didn't make sense, because the comic had some changes from the movie. I'm going to start asking some questions now, and I want you all to just step back and sort of think about this, but I want you to watch the movie first and then start thinking about some answers to these questions. Bearing the questions in mind when you're watching the movie. Be very careful of that. When you're watching the movie at the very beginning, you'll notice the origin of the relationship between Gedren and Sonja. It does not happen the way that the comics did it. There was no Mulan-esque, hey, we're raising soldiers for an army. That didn't happen. What actually happened was Gedren came into the area, we don't know why, and decided that she was attracted to Sonja and basically made a pass at her. And Sonja, in disgust, is the actual language of the movie, grabbed Gedren's own staff from her and bashed her across the face with it. And because that's how normal people react when somebody's flirting with you and you're not interested. You grab a weapon and bash them across the face with it. That reaction was what then led to Gedren basically getting the giant scar on her cheek, but also going a little batshit crazy and deciding to kill everybody. That's what the story is. That's what happens in the movie, okay? Now, whether that happened with the original Red Sonja origin from the original comics that were written in the 70s or not is moot. That's what the movie portrayed. So bear in mind what we just read through. The comics do not have that. The comics have this Mulan-esque story, which then leads to just a rapid debacle where everybody dies, and Sonja ends up being gang raped by Gedren soldiers. We did also get an allusion in the movie to the fact that the same thing happens to her in the movie. But for some reason, even though Marvel decided to include the whole horrendous gang raping topic in the comic, which I think was probably one of the reasons why the comic never got Comics Code Authority approval, they edited out the whole same-sex couple advancement sort of thing. They edited out the fact that, you know, Gedren was there clearly interested in women and interested in Sonja, and that Sonja had a really, really bad reaction to that. Why? You're already over the line here, Marvel. You've already included part of the story where a woman is being brutally gang raped. You've stuck with the script for pretty much the rest of it, even to the point where you left this little piece of dialogue at the end of the second book. Why in God's green earth would you have edited out this piece? Now, I'm not going to start making all sorts of comments, and I don't want you all to go out there on social media and immediately start making negative comments about Marvel Comics and saying, oh my God, this is blah, 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 blah. There are actually theories online about certain ways that the movie could have been interpreted. And it could be that Marvel was trying to avoid a negative interpretation which they felt was going with the movies. Or, and God help them if this is the case, Marvel Comics decided, yeah, in 1985 we're okay with including brutal gang rape of women, but we can't depict a same-sex couple in a comic. God, I hope that's not the case. Anyways, everybody, those are the questions I want you to think about when you're watching the movie, when you do go to watch it. And be leery, not leery, well, leery. Be leery of jumping to conclusions. Get the facts before you go out there and really start making grandiose statements. I'm not making any grandiose statements here because, quite frankly, I don't think I'm qualified to, because I wasn't there and I wasn't in the boardrooms at the time. But it is an interesting point to note this fairly major change and walk away from the movie. Anyways, food for thought. Everybody, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you enjoyed our introduction to Red Sonja here, and I hope you enjoyed the change of scenery here as I jump from one place to the next between filming the beginning and the end of this one. Everybody, have yourself a great day. We'll see you in the next video.